Hello, welcome to my channel, Life Odysseys. My name is Bobby Bowser. I'm coming to you from Eastern Kentucky. Hopefully with this channel, I'm going to share a lot of my stories from my past, my racing career, and current activities here on the farm. You never know what you're going to get from day to day. So this is my first video that I'm making, and I realized that I'm probably a little nervous. Who wouldn't be, right? But there's a lot of stories I want to tell. I thought this would be a good way to do it. Put them on YouTube. I was born in 1965. I started my racing career in 1988. And I raced through the 1996 season. And I accomplished 2 championships in that period of time. My father, Jack, he was a 3-time ARCA champion in 1963, 64, and 65. So at the current time, we was the only father-son that won a national championship in a racing series. So when I start telling stories, I'm not going to go in order because it'd just be way too hard to keep, in order or remember what I've done. Yeah, I could jot it down on a piece of paper, but I just think I need to do it right off the cuff. So one of the stories I believe I'll tell is probably, I'll probably start near the beginning, or try to anyways, as I was growing up. I grew up in a racing family. 2 of my other brothers raced, Jim and Gary. Gary, he won a 500-mile stock car race, USAC stock car race at Texas World Speedway in the late 70s. Jim, he was a outstanding late model driver, won lots of races around the Ohio area. I'm originally from Springfield, Ohio. But I can think of one story. I remember my dad buying me my first motorcycle, and I don't know, I was pretty young. I'll try to throw up a picture here and see what happens. But it had, I think it had a little 2-cycle engine on it, and it had training wheels, believe it or not. I don't really remember a whole lot about that period. I do remember I probably wore it out or broke it or crashed it or something. But yeah, it was, that was kind of the beginning. But Dad always put me behind the wheel of a car or whatever, taught me how to drive pretty early, pretty young. And I did that same thing with my daughter. I threw her on the golf cart. She had to stand up and just lean against the seat to drive. She was too short. She run the wheels off of that thing. But she used to she used to ride around the race shop there. And my dad had a place to sit out there on the concrete pad right outside the shop. He'd go out and sit and take a break. And she'd go flying by on this golf cart. Well, finally, she'd start coming down through there, slamming on the brakes right in front of my dad, leaving little black marks on the concrete. And Dad would tell her, said, "Listen, don't slam on the brakes and put black marks on Grandpa's concrete." And she'd say, "Okay, Dad," or "Okay, Grandpa," not Dad. So she'd take off. Hell, if she didn't come back around there again and do the same thing over again, and laughed. But yeah, there was a lot of things to get into around the race shop. I certainly did that a lot. Then I remember my dad bought me a Honda XR75. I believe it was around 1974. Man, did I run the wheels off of that thing. I wore that thing out. Man, that was a good motorcycle too. I'd run that thing from the time I got up till after dark. They had to make me get off of it. But yeah, my brother even got one like it too. And we'd go out in the neighbor field there and make a racetrack. And it was kind of comical because, yeah, I was a lot lighter and probably more fearless than my brother. And he couldn't beat me. He tried, he couldn't beat me. He'd try to run me off the racetrack out in the field, out in the weeds, try to gain an advantage, and it just didn't work. I'd blow by, but and then sometimes I'd slow down, let him go by again, so I could do the challenge again about trying to pass him again. But he'd literally try to kick me off the side of the track to keep me from passing him. Oh, that was fun. Until the farmer decided we weren't allowed to race in his field anymore. So we had to pick out another spot to race in. Then somewhere along the way, Dad bought me a Volkswagen Bug, an old one. Had to get it running. And I'll try to throw a picture of that too. Try to get it running. I got it running. And I drove it all over the place there at the race shop, up and down the driveway, all day long. It didn't matter if it was snowy. It really had made it more fun. I remember one time my grandpa came down there. They called him Cactus Pete. He wore this big old jacket, looked like Festus off of Gunsmoke. Always wore a pistol too. So I convinced him into getting in that car with me and going for a ride. Well, it was in the middle of winter. And the driveway was a solid sheet of ice. So I made it that way. I mean, from the top to the bottom was nothing but ice. So I'd take him down through there and spin around and do donuts and back and forth. And finally, it didn't take long. He wanted out. And he'd get to stutter. He'd stutter if he got excited a little bit. He'd say, now, Bobby Joe, let me out of this goddamn thing. You're going to get me hurt. This went on it seemed like forever. I'd stop. I'd spin around, stop, and he'd open the door, and I'd take off again, so he had to shut the door. Well, the next day or two, I went to go get in that Volkswagen to start driving around again. And I happened to notice it was bullet holes in the side of it. My grandpa had done shot bullet holes in this Volkswagen. Just being ornery, I guess. But he liked to mess with dynamite too. He'd blow up little pieces of dynamite down along the shop there. And we had a creek that run down through there. He'd go down through there and set dynamite off. And then complain to my dad. He said, I told you them racing barrels down there was going to blow up one of these days. And he'd just laugh. But he'd come down. He had an old garden tractor, a Ford garden tractor. He'd drive back and forth from his house, which he lived up in the little town there of Harmony. So it probably took him 10, 15 minutes to ride back and forth. But that's how he showed up, was on a tractor. Yeah. Them times was something else. At a Honda Odyssey, I'd run around all the time. But this is like, telling these stories leading up to, basically my racing career. But yeah, I mean, I didn't race anything. I raced a little bit. I raced one time motorcycles, motocross. And I did pretty good, really. But it only lasted one time because my dad said, boy, we race cars around here, not motorcycles. So that was the end of that deal. But I still had the motorcycle there at home. I rode back and forth around the property and everywhere else. But I can remember, I'd get to racing so much around the garage. I'd stir up the dust so bad Dad would come out there and yell at me, tell me you're going to have to quit because the dust is an inch thick on everything in the garage. But really, it didn't stop me. I was probably the worst out of the bunch of being ornery and out of control, I guess. Then I got the brilliant idea of setting up a ramp, which I'm sure some of this stuff all kids have done. But I set this ramp up. I used an old ramp that we had for a racing trailer. It was about 6 feet long. So I'd start out with, like one cinder block high and jump that for a while. Then that got boring, so I'd change over to 2 cinder block and so forth, and then see how far I could jump. Well, I'd go on to 3 and then 4. And finally, I was sailing through the air pretty good. So finally, Dad, he came out there. He says, "I'm telling you right now." He says, "You're going to mess around and you're going to get hurt." Well, sure enough, I didn't really get hurt, but I did crash. I launched so far, I was running, my speed was so high, I launched so far, I didn't anticipate how much room I needed to get stopped. So I had to lay her down, and the motorcycle went up underneath one of the old racing trailers. So yeah, he was standing there watching the whole thing, had to let me know. He said, I told you it was going to happen. But yeah, other things around the shop I used to do. We had a cow, and I'd torment that poor cow. Just torment the hell out of it. Well, that cow he would chase me, and I thought it was fun. But he'd chase me into spots where I couldn't get out of, and he's making them cow noises and snorting and everything else, trying to get to me in certain places. Well, he finally got me back. I remember on the creek there, run along the shop, one side had a barbed wire fence closest to the shop, and the other side of the creek had a wooden picket fence, not a picket, but a wooden fence. So I got up on the top of that fence on the other side of the creek and called that cow over there. She got over there close enough to me, and I launched over on her back. Oh boy, she didn't like that. She took me back across the creek and then took me up along that barbed wire fence and drug me down that barbed wire fence and cut my leg. I don't know, if I remember right, it was probably 6 to 8 inches long, a cut. The barbed wire cut my leg. So yeah, that was enough of that crap. That damn cow, she'd eat the damn seat off the forklift. She'd eat shop towels. You couldn't leave nothing laying around because she'd eat the shit. And she'd stick her head down in the trash barrel outside and drag stuff out of the trash barrel. Finally, Dad had to make a gate that went across the overhead door because she'd come in the shop. And you can imagine what she would do. She'd leave pile after pile cow patties all over this race shop, which really cleaning it up off of concrete wasn't too bad, but it's still annoying. So he made a special gate that went across, especially in the summertime when you got the door open, gate that would go across there to keep that cow from getting in there. Well, then the damn cow figured out how to get through there. Well, he just had that gate thing, just kind of sit down in a saddle on both sides. Well, that damn cow figured out how to put his head underneath there and lift up on that gate and knock it down, then walk right in the shop. Then she would go, she'd get loose out of the property, and we'd find her walking down the middle of Route 40, National Road, just walking down the center of the road. We'd have to go up there with a rope and get her and drag her back down to the shop. But yeah, I think that's going to be about it for this video. I'll keep talking about certain things. And it may not be, it's not going to be all racing, but a lot of it will be, because I have a lot of stories I can tell. But I hope you enjoyed. If you would, please subscribe, like, and leave comments. I want to read what you got to say. And I hope to see you back real soon. Talk to you later.